So before I flip to my PowerPoint, I want to share my personal experience with conferencing. So 10 or 12 years ago, I became a full-time writing coach at a middle school here in Hillsborough County. And I was introduced to the strategy of writing conferences or conferencing with students while they were writing, like in the writing process. And just to give you a little bit of context, I was a full-time writing coach at the largest Title I transformation middle school in the district. So we had 1,500 students. It was a pretty tough population, and we really needed to do something to get our scores up and to really see some success with our students. So I implemented conferencing cycles regularly with our students. In 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I pushed into ELA classes daily for 3 months. I assisted teachers in conferencing with students during the writing process and during writing workshops. And we saw a significant increase in scores that year. And I personally saw changes in my students and even in students that I didn't know because I was pushing into all of the classes and all of the grade levels. And when I saw the impact that just a 5-minute positive conversation can have with a student, it made me kind of buy into this for the rest of my life. And it's really my favorite thing to do. In fact, as a district coach, I spent lots of my time going to schools and helping teachers conference because it really is my favorite thing to do. So thank you for being here with me. I'm going to go ahead and flip to my PowerPoint. I do have my coaches. I know Philomena's here with me, and I believe Mandy. They're here to monitor the chat and answer questions. But of course, I will allow questions at the end, or if there's any other reason you need to ask a question, please feel free to do so. Okay, perfect. So our topic today is writing conferences. Before we get into what a writing conference is and what it looks like in the classroom, I first wanted to go over the term or the phrase or the idea of a writing workshop, because this, I think, is one of those kind of phrases that maybe is sometimes used in the education world. And I think people sometimes have different meanings of what a writing workshop really is. So I have a few definitions for you here. Really, it's just an explicit teaching and learning structure used on a daily basis with students from K through 5. We also use it in 6 through 8 to move students toward mastery of all ELA standards. Writer's Workshop is a research-based approach used to provide the gradual release of responsibility in order to grow independent thinkers, writers, and readers. So if you're familiar with our frameworks this year, we do have a 30-minute block of writing, which I'll admit is not as long as I would have hoped it to have been, but that's also why we've made some strategic changes and decisions within our writing cycles, especially in grades 3 through 5. Because the idea is that daily, there's some sort of gradual release of responsibility, whether it's a new concept or a reviewing of a concept, and then possibly modeling or guiding students through a piece of that writing and then allowing them to work on their own while you conference with them. So it's a place where students are doing the work of composing pieces of writing and through daily practice and instruction from their teacher becoming better writers. So in essence, it's really what happens every day in the writing block. Like I said, that is one of the reasons we extended the writing cycles to 10 days in grades 3 through 5, because we really wanted to make sure that we were allowing for even more time to conference with students while they were engaged in the writing process. So what is a writing conference? I really want you to think of a writing conference as a conversation. What we're really trying to do is just talk with our students. We want to invite students to have a real give and take with us during the process. We want to speak in a conversational tone because we want those students to feel comfortable with sharing their writing with us. We want to sit alongside students and we want to make sure that we're at their eye level. So later on in the session, we'll talk about where you might do conferencing in your classroom. And in both of the options that you have, we are sitting at the eye level of the student to help make them feel more comfortable. And finally, we really want to use those active listening strategies. We want students to know that while they're with us in a writing conference, they are our priority, and we are listening to their thoughts and their ideas about their writing. Keep in mind that writing is deeply personal, and being vulnerable with one's own writing can be nerve-wracking for a student. It can be nerve-wracking for an adult. So we really want to keep that in mind when we're talking to students within a conference. The goal of a writing conference is to teach students something about writing that they can use in the future. If you add to their writing toolbox each time you conference, they become better writers over time. And I've definitely seen this work with students. If you implement this on a regular basis and it becomes pretty common and regular that they are conferencing with you, their toolbox definitely grows over time. So let's talk about the reasons of why we would confer or conduct writing conferences with our students. In my opinion, it's really a great opportunity for one-on-one time with an adult in a positive situation. And sometimes I think some of our students don't get a lot of one-on-one personal time with adults. We don't know what's going on at home. We don't know how often their parents are home with them or how much interaction they're able to get with their parents. And I just learned when I started conferencing with students that most of the time students were one-on-one with adults in the school setting. Typically it was because they were in trouble or it was something negative. So I feel like this is that one positive situation that they really start to crave. So why do we confer? Well, first, we really want to develop those relationships with our students. We want to learn about each other, and this is a really great way to do that. And even though it's a 3 to 7 minute kind of block of time every few days, you really do start to get to know the students' personalities, and they start to get to know you as well. We also do it because each student is a different kind of writer, right? This is where our differentiation comes in. Every student has strengths in their own ways. Every student has weaknesses in their own ways. And by meeting with them one-on-one, we're able to really hone in on what we need to with each student. It also is a place where we can assist our struggling students, give them a little bit more of that feedback and that focus that they need. It allows us to encourage our skilled students. So those students that are maybe really skilled writers or creative writers, this gives us that opportunity to meet with them as well and really encourage them and challenge them to be better. It also allows us time to help students make good choices while they're writing. We are able to receive and give feedback to students. One of the things I really like about this is that we're able to catch students' mistakes when they are making them. So I've determined that if a student isn't doing something correctly, like using transitions or using a topic sentence to begin their body paragraphs, I'd much rather catch them in the middle of body 1 and correct their mistake so that they don't do it in body 2 than for them to write an entire essay. And 3 days later, when I go to score it, I determined that they didn't understand what to do correctly. So I really like the process because you're really kind of catching them, excuse me, as they make those mistakes and you're able to correct them. And then finally, it's a really good way to inform your whole class in small group instruction, because you're able to notice trends and then revise your plans as necessary. So if you conference with 3 or 4 students in one day, you notice all of them are doing the same thing, you can decide, well, that's maybe what my mini lesson should focus on tomorrow, since I'm already seeing that trend or that pattern. We want to remember that feedback is a key to student learning. So this is one really good way to provide that individualized feedback. And the other thing I want to mention is that when I conference with students, I typically try to have like star stickers. And every time they come see me, I give them a star sticker on their checklist. And it's amazing how effective that can be with students. Even 16-year-old tattooed boys will really love to get their star sticker. So that's just a fun way to give them a treat. So then let's talk about when we would conference with students. So while conferencing with students after an assessment, so let's say we're doing the mid-year assessment this month, we do want to sit down with our students after that assessment. We want to go through their writing with them. We want to give feedback. We want to encourage them to make revisions. And that is a positive and much needed approach. The majority of our focus today is actually going to be on conferencing with students while they are writing. So all during the writing process. So there's kind of two times that you conference after assessments to give feedback and encourage revisions. But then what we're really focusing on today is to conference while they are in the process of writing. Obviously that can't happen on assessments, but it can happen any other day in your classroom. So here's a quote for you about feedback. I'll have you read that on the screen. So thinking about that opportunity to provide that feedback while they're in the moment rather than afterwards. So when do we conference with our students? So during that writing workshop, like I stated at the beginning, the writing workshop is really what's happening on a daily basis in your classroom during that writing block. There's a gradual release of responsibility. Some days there's many lessons, some days there's quick reviews, some days it's completely independent writing with conferencing, but that's when this conferencing occurs in your classroom. So at every stage of the writing process. So as soon as students start writing, for example, you want to make sure that they've drafted a logical plan. So one of their checkpoints would be to show you their plan. You want to make sure, have you been able to really sort and categorize your evidence and then pick the pieces you want to use? Once you've approved their plan and they start writing their introduction, they come back to you. You want to make sure they've written a strong controlling idea, included a hook or any other expectations you have of your students, send them back to start their body one, and that process just continues throughout. Another time to confer is when a student needs coaching. So let's say they're not necessarily at a stopping point or in between paragraphs of their writing, but they're just stuck and they really need that coaching. They can come back and get that from you. Students should periodically check in at various points in their essay. You could use a checklist or a rubric, which I'll show you some examples at the end, to make sure every student has met the criteria for each part of their essay and as a basis for students to return to the teacher periodically. So I like to use checklists with stop signs because it shows the student when they need to come back to the conferencing table to see me, but they also know that there's other opportunities they can come back as well, even if they're not at a stop sign. So where do we confer or conference with our students? So this is that topic where you have two choices within your classroom and you really just need to go with which one works the best for you and your physical environment. So the first one is where students sit. So this is more of the teacher circulating around the room. It does give some advantages for students. They may be more at ease since they're on their own turf, so to speak. They're at their desk. They do have easy access to their student materials. So if you have a text set and a planning sheet and pencils and erasers and all of that, they've got that there at their desk already. Nearby students could listen and learn and actually pick up some of the conversation as well. And then as you move throughout the room, you can always redirect misbehaviors or off-task students as needed. So there are some benefits to doing the conferencing kind of in a circulation manner. My personal preference is to use a conference table somewhere in the room. And I like this one, especially right now, because I think it's more comfortable and in this day and age, safe if physical space around students is limited. So I do come from the middle school world where the students are quite larger than elementary school students, and trying to navigate around them and their desks and kind of kneel next to them is pretty difficult and uncomfortable. So I always used a conference table where they would come back and sit with me. Another pro for that is to have accessibility to conferring tools. So if I had extra resources or handouts that I, might need to offer specific students based on their needs, I would have those available to me at my conferencing table. Depending on placement of the conferencing table, you still have teacher presence and management. You're able to see all the students in the classroom and redirect as needed, back from the conference table. And then it's also less distracting to nearby students. So you're not kneeling next to a student who may be really in the moment writing their essay, and you wouldn't be bothering anybody else. So a few notes about using a conference table is that we encourage you that it's away from the teacher's desk. Sometimes students perceive the teacher desk to be kind of a negative place. Maybe they're only called to your desk if they're in trouble. So you want to have a different place or space in the room to allow students to feel more comfortable. And it also allows the teacher to work with more than one student at a time. So I'm going to be showing you a couple options for conferencing. One of them is a one-on-one conference where only one student is sitting with you. And then the other form of conferencing I'm going to show you is actually where you have multiple seats and it's kind of an ongoing flow of students in and out the seat. You're still really only talking with one student at a time, but there are other students in the vicinity, and I'll show you some examples of that within videos as well. In that case, I like to provide extra seats for students who need extra support. So if I have that one student who's just refusing to write or is off task no matter what I try, I have a special seat right next to me at my conference table, and they get to sit there the entire class period while all of the other students kind of come in and out of the situation. So again, this may be just personal choice. It may be what your physical space allows for you to have in your classroom, accessibility to furniture and things like that. But just know that there are a few options for this conferencing. Now, either way you choose, whether you are circulating and kind of bending down next to students and having conversations, or whether you have a specified place or a table in your room that students visit you for conferencing, you will want to establish some procedures so that students are really able to understand what their responsibilities are, either at the conference table or while they're working independently. So establish a protocol with your students. Prior to conferencing, students must know your expectations. So this would include behavior expectations. Like, for example, if you use CHAMPS, you would need to review the CHAMPS with them prior to the conferencing session. They would need to know the minimum requirements for the writing task. For instance, how many numbers of paragraphs are you expecting them to write? What are they to include in each paragraph? And this is where that checklist or that rubric comes in. So if you are using a checklist or a rubric, you want to make sure you review that with your whole class before you start the conferencing process. You want students to know when they are to visit the conferencing station. So is it when they come to a stop sign on the checklist? Is it when they are stuck? Is it when you call them back? Or is it a combination of all three of those, depending on where they are? They should know the minimum number of visits to a conferencing station. So, by the end of this week, you should have been to my table at least twice, right? Things like that. They also really need to understand what they are to be doing while working independently. Things like, what do you do if you need to use the restroom or sharpen your pencil, or if you have a question that doesn't really require conferencing that you could maybe ask your neighbor about. So what are your procedures and protocols around those types of things? And then finally, it's good for students to have kind of a daily goal or a time frame for completion, because since you are focusing on a student at a conference table and not necessarily watching the other students, every second of the class period, you want students to know that at the end of this 30 minutes, you should have your introduction written, or at the end of this 30 minutes, I expect you to have 2 pieces of evidence and 2 pieces of elaboration in your body paragraphs. things like that, so that they know what they're working towards. So now that we've talked about why we conduct writing conferences, when we conduct writing conferences, and where we might conduct those writing conferences, let's talk about the parts of a writing conference. So what happens during a writing conference? So the first thing you do is you discover. So you discover what the student is writing about. And we'll talk about some question stems that you could ask students in order to do this discovering. Once you've discovered what they're writing about and you talk through it, you're going to assess. You're going to assess how well the student is doing, how well the student is doing what he or she is doing, and then decide what to teach him or her. So you're assessing what they're doing, and then you're making that determination of what to teach. And then you get to the teach. You're going to teach the student how to do what he or she is doing better. So the parts of a writing conference kind of follow this flow where you discover, you assess, and then you teach. So let's break those down a little bit further. So in the discovery process, the focus is actually going to be on the student rather than the writing. So that may seem a little odd that we're doing writing conferences, but we're going to focus on the student rather than the writing. So let's talk about that. We want to make sure that we allow them the opportunity to express their thoughts and their feelings and work through the process. We talked about how writing can be a little scary, a little vulnerable, personal. So we want to make sure that the student feels comfortable in that. So some intentional language you can use during this part of the conference is just simply ask, how's it going, right? And the student may respond with something that has nothing to do with their writing. If they're having a bad day or just had an issue at lunch, they may tell you that. And that's okay, because remember, we're building relationships with our students. And knowing where the student is kind of in their mind or at that moment is going to help you give them the feedback they need to get back on track with their writing. Another question you can use is, well, what are you doing as a writer today, right? So rather than what is your story about, I'm asking the student, what are you doing as a writer today? And some of this may take some practice, right? Students may not completely understand, the conversation or what types of information you can be sharing with each other. So this is something that'll happen over time with practice. And then could you tell me about the writing work that you're doing? So again, focusing on the work that they are doing. So that focus is on the student rather than the writing. You're definitely going to talk about the writing and give feedback about the writing, but this is just a really great way to start that conversation. Then you go into the assess. You're going to listen to what the student says. What are their responses to the questions on the previous slide? Then you're going to invite the student to read their writing aloud to you. You're going to look at the student's writing and you're going to decide what to teach during that process. So some intentional language during the assess process is, let's take a look at your writing. What can I do to help you with your writing? What part of the writing process did you just finish? What will you do next? Is there anything about this that you are finding difficult? Or what other details could you provide? So those are just a few examples of some of the intentional language or questions that you could ask students during this process of the conference when you're really trying to determine what kind of piece you want to focus on, because remember, it is a short conference, and I'll get to that time frame in a moment, but it's a short conference. So you really want to focus on just one thing. You don't want to give them a list of 10 things that they're doing incorrectly or wrong. That would not be very encouraging for the student, and it's not really the point of a writing conference. So you're going to determine that one thing that you want to focus on. Then you teach. You give them feedback, you teach, you coach, you give them that link to their independent work. So you're teaching about one aspect in each conference, whether it's a strategy for navigating a stage of the writing process, a craft technique, or a point of grammar or mechanics. So some intentional language around this piece is, I want to give you some feedback, or what might happen if, or can you explain your decision to Or now I want you to try what we talked about on your own. So the idea is that you're able to give them the tools or the resources or the information they need by coaching, by probing, by asking questions, and then they know what they need to do when they go back to their desk and they're able to do that on their own. So an overview of writing conferences. So we want to keep conferences short. We know that we do have a limited amount of time and possibly a large class. So we want to make sure those conferences are kind of no more than 3 to 7 minutes each time. And during that 3 to 7 minutes, you are following kind of this process. So remember, discuss or discover, assess, and teach. And during that, we are listening. We are providing specific praise, helping students feel empowered and energized about their writing. Find something that they did really well before you get to the piece that you're going to help them with. You want to ask versus tell. So this is where our probing and our coaching knowledge comes in. We want to make sure that we are kind of leading them and guiding them to what they need to correct in their writing. And then we're ready to exit because they now know what to do next and they can go back to their seats and complete that and then come back and check in with you when they are done. So now that we've talked about all of this information about writing conferences, I'm going to show you a few video examples. And they are very different, which I love because it shows you the different options you have for writing conferences. So this first one is actually a one-on-one conference where the teacher is conferencing with Matthew. He's in 4th grade. And these videos are not necessarily the same style as FSA writing, but they do follow the same structure of a writing conference. So it's just about 6 minutes. And I want you to just listen to the conversation between the student and the teacher, kind of make note of some of the questions or the feedback that the teacher is giving, and then even some of the responses that the student has for those questions. I'm going to navigate to this website, and then we will have an opportunity for questions. If you have your video on, you may want to flip it off just for the video because it does help with bandwidth. Okay. Philomena, can you see the video pop up?
I can see the boy on the screen, but it's not playing at this moment.
Okay. So let me share the new one.
It's starting to power up.
Okay, perfect. So I think it's just buffering a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
See, here we go.
Hello?
See if I can get it to play.
I can check right now. I have a pile in front of me. I don't believe they were put in my mailbox.
Could you guys make sure your mics are muted, please?
I do have Burleson. Yeah, I do right here. Yep.
Oh.
Why did she say the post office? The ones I've gotten were placed in my.
Okay, sorry about that. Can you guys hear that?
No, Sharon, it's not audible.
Okay. All right, right, let's try this again.
Things you want to. So how's your writing going, Matthew?
It's good.
What you doing?
Writing about writing about opinions that we would like to change. And
How about that, Philomena?
It's working.
Okay, perfect. All right, I'm going to play it. Sorry, guys.
Things you want to change, situations you want to change. And what do you want to change?
about having homework.
What about homework?
It's like we already learn.
What's your opinion about it?
Well, we shouldn't have it because we already learn everything in school.
You might be the only kid I've ever met that doesn't think we should have homework. Most kids love homework so much. And I'm kidding. Your opinion's shared far and wide. So how do you feel the writing went? Like, what did you do as a writer to try to really express your opinion and to try to help people understand where you're coming from?
I thought of how it would affect your lives and stuff. And I worked with one of my friends. We looked up reasons on the Chromebook
So
of
you've
how
been-
to do it.
So you've been trying to think of reasons why homework, there shouldn't be homework.
Yeah.
Okay. And I see that you said your first reason is you spend half your day in school learning about something.
Yeah.
And then you have to do it again. Okay. And that kids can't sit around all day.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are some of your reasons. And what else have you done to try to come up with, to try to get your opinion across in a really clear way?
I'd just sit there. I'd think of reason. I would list reasons, and then in my mind, and then I would write the best ones that
Yeah.
I would think of
Well,
really good.
That does seem exactly what you've done. I love how you started. You ever have an exhausting day at school and then you have to do your homework. That's how I feel every day. That's why I want to ban homework. And you're not shy about what you're saying either. I want to ban homework. That's bold. Okay. We need people like you with bold opinions that can change things. Okay. And then it seems like a lot of what you have here is this is a reason. My first reason is that you can spend half your day learning about something, then you have to do it again. I mean, you already know it. Okay. And it feels like what that part is your reason. Okay. I think one way that you could be an even stronger opinion writer is to extend your opinions with some examples. Okay, of what you mean.
I didn't put an example there, so
where is
I
it?
had right there.
Okay, you read, for example, when I go home, the problems are so easy, it feels like just writing numbers on a page with no purpose. That's a mini story that really, you did elaborate exactly on, I mean, you already know it. But I think that your main point there is that you spend half your day in school learning about something. Okay, that to me that's your reason right there. And if you could develop that with examples. Okay, because one way we develop reasons is with examples. It's going to help people understand that more. Okay, so I'm going to show you something. I'm sure you're not going to agree with this. Okay, I'm sure, but this writer has a reason that she uses examples to get her point across. Okay, you're not going to like this. Summer homework should be banned, right? You want summer homework, don't you?
No.
I'm kidding. But this is an adult who wrote this. And she has a lot of reasons. Just like you have reasons for no homework really during the school year, she's got reasons for no summer homework. And look at this one here. It says summer homework can also take away from the important learning that goes on outside of school. She didn't stop there. Okay. And Nancy Kale is the author of this piece. She includes 2 examples of what goes on outside of school. She wrote, this includes reading for pleasure, which helps you establish a lifelong love of books. Play is also essential. It gives you an opportunity to master social skills such as teamwork that will be a key to your success as a working adult. So she took the reason and gave us a couple examples to help us understand what she means. I mean, what is important learning that goes on outside of school? Okay. She gave us, I think, 2 very good examples, which helps me ultimately think that she's on the right track with her opinion that summer homework may not be the best idea. Okay. So I think when you have a reason, like you spend half your day in school learning about something, I think you could also use examples to help us understand what that means. And you can say to yourself, well, what do I mean by that exactly? You could say, for example, and see what pops out of your head. Okay, so let's try that. Read the reason again, my first reason.
My first reason is that you spend half of your day in school learning about something.
Stop there. For example.
For example,
You're here for 6 hours. What are you learning about? For example.
we learn about math, and then
Say more about that math you're learning.
we learn about like geometry, and then we go home and
Okay,
the homework.
okay. So we learn about geometry, and also.
And also, the worksheets that we bring home are.
Don't talk
an
about school.
example.
One example of all this learning that you do
Yeah.
something in school is the math and the geometry, right?
Yeah.
What's another example of something you do in school?
We learn about social studies
Okay.
and about like the past
Okay.
and history.
Sound pretty busy. You have a busy day and you're learning lots of stuff. Math and geometry and social studies and history. Oh my gosh, my head is starting to hurt already. Okay, just thinking about it. And then you have to do it again at home. Now that makes more sense to me now. And then when you talk about the problems that are home, I think it gives more weight to that because you gave some examples of what happened in school. So, when you have reasons, okay, giving examples is a way of really helping people really see in their heads what you're talking about. Okay, and I think it's just, reasons are great, and you have some really good ones, I think, that really do make a good argument. But those examples, to me, are what really help people understand the reasons. Okay, and just be aware that giving those examples is important. Okay, so I'm going to have you could try that right over here. Okay, just try writing those two examples about math and social studies. Okay, and you can use those exact words. Okay, you can use her words like this includes, or you could say for example. Okay, as a way of introducing your examples. Okay, so we're going to have you try that right now and come back and see how it goes later. Okay, all right.
Okay, I believe I'm back to my PowerPoint. Philomena, can you let me know?
Yes, you are.
Awesome, thank you. All right, I'm going to show you another video. This next video is actually a middle school example. And this example is more along the conferencing kind of environment that I did in my classroom personally. And that's where I would have a table set up. In this instance, there's a teacher and a writing coach, both conferencing, and I'd have multiple students kind of in and out of the chairs around me as I go through the process. But I want to show you this example, even though it's middle school, because it still fits everything that we've talked about this morning. So let's see if we can get this video to work. Could you hear that, Philomena?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay. All right, perfect.
Okay, I'm Elizabeth Dennis-Babin, and I am the writing coach here at Dowdell Middle Magnet School. Our school, as a population, is what we call a Renaissance school, which means that over 90% of our students are on free or reduced lunch here.
There seems to be a nice kind of dance between what the teacher's doing and what the students are doing, and they seem comfortable going up and down. What's that process all about?
Well, the process is about we want to really get to the core of metacognition for students as they're writing. We ask them to stop at specific points in their writing process to reflect, to talk about what they've done. As a teacher, it gives opportunity if we're trying to gather data on which students still need to master that particular skill. We can use it for information either to overlay on our next springboard activity that we're doing, or to do a specific pullout if it's a child who has a great need and just really did not get it. Remember that we're writing a response to our expository text. Okay, we're writing a response to that expository text. And so today, here's the chance. You're going to be at level 0 while you're at your desk writing, but if you're up here for conferencing, because we're doing conferencing while writing, you may talk at a level 1 or 2 with a teacher. So let me ask this question. If you're in your desk and you're writing, should you be talking to a neighbor? No. No, you shouldn't be talking to a neighbor. If you need help, you come to an empty chair, which takes me to the H. When a chair is available, I still don't see all eyes up here. When a chair is available, you need to come up to the conferencing station. I want you walking silently to the front of the room, no bopping people's heads. as you walk by, okay, walking up there quickly, and then we're going to do your writing, discuss it, you go back to your seat, you do the job and come up to get it checked. Thumbs up if you got that part. Hands up if you have a question. Okay, let's talk a little bit about where your stopping points are today. After we talk a little bit about the plan that we've been working on, then you're going to start right on your introduction with your hook and your thesis. When you're done, I want you to stop in conference because we want to make sure that it's done correctly. Then you'll move on to your body paragraph. Remember, the essentials are that you have your claim, your evidence, and your commentary. And since we know that our thesis gives us 2 body paragraphs, you're going to do that twice, and then you'll finally end up with your conclusion. Okay, so where in the text can we find evidence to support that Michael Lupinacci thinks that people should give their money because it's giving back to the public? Show me where. What about this sentence in the beginning?
This one. All are those who have so much.
Okay, does that quote that you just read connect to the fact that Michael Lupinacci wants people to give back to public schools? Yes. So how could we introduce that as support?
You can say as once said.
Yep, that's a great way to start it. As he said in his article, or as was once said in his article, and then we're going to want to write that quote exactly, right? We want to write the quote exactly. Now, what punctuation are you going to use around that quotation to make sure your reader knows that it comes from Michael Lupinacci and not from you? The ones that we use for the title. So what do we call those? Do you remember? Quotation mark? Quotation marks, yes. So we want to use quotation marks around that. So go ahead and put your evidence there and then come back and we'll work on commentary. Okay? So go back to your seat and then come back in a minute.
Can you talk a little bit about what kind of questions you were asking? I noticed that you were very skilled in adjusting your questions according to the students who were coming up to you. Do you have some questions in mind already, or how do you choose what you ask them?
We anticipated that students would probably struggle with what kind of punctuation do you need to use with quotes? What might that quote look like, and how would we introduce that quote? And then there are some other things that we knew about those particular classes that they're still struggling with. One is hooks. That just seems to be a very difficult thing for both of those classes, how to make the hook really draw the reader in and still connect to whatever the thesis is going to be. So we anticipated those things before they even came down, and as you saw, they were struggling still with hooks. They were struggling with, what does that evidence look like if it doesn't come from my own life experience, if it has to be grounded in text? And so we could develop some of those questioning before they came to us, because we knew that these were new skills to them.
All right, I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. All right, we're back. So hopefully you enjoyed those 2 video examples of different ways that conferencing can look within a classroom, different methods, different approaches. So let's talk about those checklists and those resources that can be used. And these resources that I'm showing you right now have been shared in our lessons and are linked in Canvas and our resource page. But here's some examples of an informative writing checklist where students have pieces of each paragraph that they are working on. And then when they get to that stop sign, they are asked to go visit the conference table just to make sure they're kind of on the right track or to get feedback. On the right, you see that informative writing self-assessment. So that's another way that you could have students kind of keep track or hold themselves accountable as they are independently writing throughout the process. We have one of these for opinion writing as well. And these can be downloaded and adjusted or revised to meet kind of your expectations of paragraphs or what you've taught them to do within paragraphs. You could revise those statements and adjust where the stop signs are if you chose to. I want you to remember that when you're conferencing, in addition to the students having a document to hold themselves accountable, the teacher should also determine a way to record notes or keep track of your conversations and your conferences. So whether it's a roster and you're just checking off how many times they come back and see you, or if it's something a little bit more comprehensive where you're really keeping track of each time that you meet with the student, what you discussed, and what they were going to go back and fix, so that when they come back up, you're able to go back to your notes and look at that in case it's 2 days later or something like that. So that was it as far as conferencing goes this morning, and I'm running out of time. So what I wanted to do in our last few moments together was just give you a few reminders and updates about writing information. So the first one is that the FSA Text-Based Writing Bootcamp is in Canvas now. That little screenshot shows you where you can find those resources right on our resource page. It is for 4th and 5th grade. It provides that focused support in text-based writing to prepare students for success on the FSA. It is a 6-week unit of instruction where they're very explicitly reviewing the 6 steps. There's modeling, support, and then of course time built in for that independent practicing where hopefully you can implement that conferencing. And then it ends with another practice assessment. And depending on when you start the boot camp, you may have one more week at the end before the FSA to really determine where you need to go with instruction. So those resources include an outline of the 6 weeks, daily lesson plans, PowerPoints, and handouts. So this is optional. It can be implemented during your writing block in place of your regular 10-day lesson cycles. I just wanted to remind you that was there. Elaboration resources. This was the other request by coaches last month. So I wanted to remind you of a few places where you can find some information to help your students. The writing strategy index that we shared with you guys, I think back in December or January, there are multiple different strategies for elaboration within that index. You'll see those right there in the middle. And not only does it give you kind of the definition of those strategies, but it also gives you examples of what those might look like in writing. So you can find that resource. And then another really great resource is just the FSA scoring samplers on fsassessments.org. If you look within the high scoring papers in those sampler sets, the 4th and the 5th grade one, you can see examples of different strategies for elaboration. You can put those under the Elmo and really dissect that writing with your students and then have them practice those same strategies within their writing. All of those resources, along with everything you see on the screen, can be found in our ELA teacher resource course. Under instructional resources, there is a writing button, and within that writing button, you have rubrics, checklists, original thought examples, the writing strategy index, the 6 steps, the analyzing trends document that I shared for you to record trends after assessments like the mid-year assessment. And then those scoring sampler essays can be found on fsassessments.org. Those are where you can see those high scoring papers from the state of Florida and really show students examples of what, citing evidence looks like, what elaboration looks like, and things like that. Finally, I want to end by just reminding you that we are in the window of administration for our mid-year writing assessment. It goes all the way till February 26th, but hopefully you've determined the earlier you do it, the quicker you'll have the feedback to give students, and hopefully have most of the month of March to really focus and hone in on that writing instruction. The scores will be due in School City March 5th. The test IDs have been shared in our newsletters. That analyzing trends in student work document that I've shared previously, that can be found in Canvas. And then for 4th and 5th, just a reminder, you're using the FSA rubric, and in 2nd and 3rd grade, we have those district rubrics linked in Canvas for you to use for scoring that are really more aligned to the grade levels. So I have just about 5 minutes left, so that's enough time for any questions that you have or clarification that you have, and then you can hop into your next Zoom for the day. Here are the references that I used today, that screenshot of that book, A Teacher's Guide to Writing Conferences in Grades K through 8. That's also where the video resource came from. Great resource if you don't have it. It's a really good one to use. A lot of the information I shared with you today came from that resource. And then of course, that second video was a College Board video from our middle school curriculum.
Sharon, there's lots of questions in the chat about primary conferencing resources and or videos.
Okay, let me stop my share. Start my video. Okay, so great question about primary conferencing. So that book that I just showed you, A Teacher's Guide to Conferencing, to Writing Conferences, Grades K through 8 by Carl Anderson. If you purchase that book, there is a code, a website code in there that allows you access to all of those videos where I pulled the 4th grade video. And there are primary conference video examples in that resource. So those are some great examples. If you are able to get that resource or get your hands on that resource, you can log into that website and see those examples. What else, Philomena, that we should talk about in our next 2 or 3 minutes?
Nancy Barber has a question. I have a question about conferencing with students on the mid-year. I work with an e-learning 5th grade group. Am I allowed to share the text with them in Canvas for the purposes of revision?
Yes, so we determined at the beginning of the year, in order to kind of make those assessments open so that teachers could conference with students afterwards, we kind of committed to creating new assessments for next year. It doesn't mean that we won't ever use these specific text sets and prompts again, but we won't use them next year. So yes, you can share them in Canvas, but I'd encourage it to be not in a manner that they could download and print necessarily, but only in maybe a PDF, like a picture or something, just because I wouldn't want those text sets to get printed and start floating around the internet or around the district. So if there's a way that you can, just share the images, that's perfect. That, kind of helps keep it as secure as possible for the future. Yes, Nancy, thank you.
Sharon, I have a question.
Sure, Christina.
I had some teachers asking the FSA boot camp has, if we're reading it correctly, the kids are doing one piece for the 6 weeks. And
so they actually end up writing 3 essays by the end of the 6 weeks. So they write the one with the teacher guidance and modeling on yoga. Then they write their own on sleep, and they're doing those 2 simultaneously. And then at the end, there will be an additional practice assessment where they get to kind of show you what they've learned over those first 5 weeks. So actually, they end up writing 3 essays by the end of the 6 weeks.
Okay, thank you. We misread it, so that helps us figure out what to do. Thank you so much.
It's a little hard when all the lessons aren't there yet. We just have the outline. So thank you for asking and clarifying. We are trying to get the remainder of those weeks out as soon as possible. All right, any other questions before I let you guys sign off, because you do have to sign into another Zoom for your textbook adoption and 3rd grade portfolio information. Guys, just know, I know it was limited time. We didn't have a ton of time to talk. Please email me or Philomena Exius or Mandy Leathers if you have questions. We would be happy to extend additional resources to you or answer questions, and I will post this in Canvas. Thank you guys. Have a great day.